Good morning, friends. It has been such a long time since I have seen most of you in person, and you are looking just fine. You are looking good. I love seeing all these faces I know and care about, and some faces that are new that I've never met before. That's a good sign, and thank you. Much has happened since we were last together. COVID. Oh, COVID. That was the good part of my last 3 years. It played havoc with so many of us. Gave us time out of time, for some way too much time and separation, and for others it was an amazing time to find other ways to connect and find meaning in our lives. For some, that time was good for our souls, and for others it was so disorienting that we went through the hells of learning ourselves anew. And often the depression that dislocation can engender. I don't know how many of you felt any of those, but it was an amazing time. I read daily of the ways that the virus closed us down, and know firsthand of the ways it impacted our teens and young adults. I actually spent 5.5 months with one of my teens learning American history, geometry, and I have to say, I learned a lot. I don't think she learned anything, but it felt like school. I think it felt like school for her to come to my house every day for 6 or 7 hours for 5.5 months. So for many, they lost graduating in person. They saw themselves graduate in a little Zoom where they walked across a television, or a video stage. They didn't get to go to their prom, their last dance of high school. They didn't meet and see their friends in person. They suffered an inability to figure out how to be adults, some of them, when personal interactions were always virtual. They forgot sometimes how to plan. They experienced the uncertainty of the times combined with the challenges of normal developmental stages, and as we all know, those can be great. But for those of us on the other side of young adulthood, it became an unforgettable time of trying to create comfort and stability when nothing felt stable or comfortable. We had Christmas outside on the porch until we froze. Then everybody went home and I cooked my own dinner for myself. I had friends who had their holidays on their patios in November because it was warm enough to. What the heck? You adapted. Maybe you risked your health to be with others, but it was not the same. For many of us, we teased memories out of the past and found connections to family and friends over the decades. For many, the loneliness was unbearable. We witnessed the creativity in this challenge for those who found a million ways to find connections to themselves and others. Some went inside for the stirrings of the spirit or the stirrings of the artistic. My sister took online poetry classes. Friends and family started walking trails every day because they could do it alone. Friends and family members did not make it, and we grieved alone or virtually, but it was not the same, was it? Babies were born, and the ache of wanting to hold those precious bundles and love them was a physical ache as well. For many of us, this became an internal journey of a lifetime, I thought. But then, I want to tell you my own story of what happened after all of that, after experiencing all that COVID could throw at us and throw at me and throw at you. Let me tell you some of what happened to me after that. Not because mine is the most profound or important story, because we've all changed significantly in the last 3 years, but because I believe there is something of the universal in my path. As 2020 opened, I had just been elected to the Oxford Borough Council. Something fun to do at 72. Oxford's a sweet little town of 58 people with big dreams and an orientation to care for each other sublimely. The council was installed on January the 6th, and we were on fire. We thought we were all that and a bag of chips, as my daughter would say. We had dreams for the transformative nature of our terms in office, and it felt palpable. We knew we were onto something. We began our work. We got a grant from the county in February for a comprehensive planning process. You know, they kept saying, well, so-and-so's not doing very well. And I said, well, what were they supposed to be doing? And they said, well, we hadn't told them yet. And I said, well, that's not fair. So I became chair of that committee. You know, but I loved it. And it's about to finish up right this minute, if you can believe it. The council signed off in March on that, and we were off and running. We were supposed to start in January of 2021, but COVID shutdowns began right before our very second council meeting in March, and everything went virtual at that point. It was hard to think about doing a plan where we had to meet with everybody when it was only virtual. We did pretty well with that method, though physical and concrete projects were put on the shelf. We didn't know for how long. The paperwork still came, and we kept moving along. A year passed, and then our borough manager resigned. I believe that every borough manager in Pennsylvania resigned that day because as I became chair of the search committee, there was nobody that wanted to take up our offer. We hired a consultant to help us search, and we did the best we could. We also hired an interim to help us find the right candidate. We all know about how that goes in this world, don't we? So those are familiar words for all of us. Every borough in the world was in the same place, and we really did have trouble finding the right candidate. But by the end of summer that year, 2021, we had found our candidate, and that was good. That was and is still very good. But in July of 2021, I ran into a wall, literally. I hit the accelerator instead of the brake and ran into a concrete wall. You know, on my way to a meeting, I ended up in the ER. My sternum was fractured, but other than that, I seemed to be just fine. The doctor said that they'd done a CAT scan, and when my bone was healed, I should have a couple of things checked out. I didn't even think about it. I said, oh, okay, I can do that. I felt well, and I'm one of those people who always thinks nothing serious will ever happen to me. It took 6 months for the bone to heal, and that's good. And so I made an appointment for my mammogram. The next day, the doctors told me I probably had breast cancer. Okay, I thought, what do I do now? I went for another CAT scan and an MRI, and it turns out that I also had a suspicious tumor on my kidney. So I went to Philly for a consult and a biopsy. That too was malignant, and as the doctor told me, he was a top doctor because kidneys take precedence over breasts. So I said, well, you know, you seem to have an exaggerated idea of how important you are, but I thought that was an interesting thing for him to say. So, but at any rate, he said it was a large tumor. So I planned for surgery in March. But in mid-February, I was diagnosed, hold your hat, with endometrial cancer as well. And my doctors told me that they wanted to try and take out my kidney and do a complete hysterectomy at the same time. In the meantime, other organs were biopsied and found to be benign. So at this point, I was going to 5 to 9 doctor's appointments and lab appointments a week. What the doctors and oncologists were amazed by was that none of these cancers were systemic. Each one was discrete and did not bear any relationship to the others. Now, if you gotta have it, that's not a bad way to get it, because they think you are like the queen of all medical problems. You know, they get the book is this big, and they go, oh my gosh, we must be extra careful because you are an anomaly. And so being an anomaly is a really good thing when you're dealing with something that rare. In the meantime, I was biopsied, my thyroid was biopsied, other things were biopsied, and everything else was benign. But the doctors and oncologists were amazed. Mine was that they were not related at all. But let me back up for a minute, because I'm coming to the real topic of my sermon. Almost everyone I knew came at me with stories of their own experiences or how they thought I would cope with all of this. As you might guess, the care was very welcome. The myriad ways that everybody thought that I should deal with everything I was dealing with got very, very confusing. I became the maven of the internet. I found 1,000 things that I should know to make good decisions. Within a very short time, I had overloaded on all the internet could disgorge, and I would spout off medical terminology at rapid speed with the best of them. But knowledge wasn't helping me at all. As I said to my children, it feels as though my brain is full. There's no room for anything else, even patience. I walked around in a daze. It really did not suit me, though. Walking in a daze is not my style. It's not how I live my life. So I began the search. How many of you know that feeling of having so many facts that it takes you away from what you need to be doing to satisfy the needs of your spirit? Not to mention those of your body. I surely did. I was busy, but extremely unsatisfied. I began a regimen that started me on a different path a few months into my treatment. At first, I introduced breathing exercises into my days. I breathed in through my nose when it wasn't dripping, and out through my mouth every time I lay down to take a nap, which was often during those months because I was exhausted. It began to take only 4 or 5 deep breaths and exhales until I could feel the shift, and I could sleep. I was calm. Sleep was a treasured friend then. I asked a friend of mine in South Carolina to be my trauma buddy. Do you all know about trauma buddies? Everybody needs to have somebody who knows them well enough and loves them enough to tell them the truth when they're going through this. Partly it's a listening exercise, and sometimes it's just asking you that question. Sometimes it's day or night. She was available to me day or night, and I can't even tell you how that did for me. So, and to my everlasting gratitude, she agreed that she would be that person. No time of day or night was too much for her. The gift of that relationship and that of my children and grandchildren and friends was immense. Shopping was done for me and magically appeared on my back stoop. Remember, we were still in COVID, and I now was extremely, extremely compromised. So I didn't ever see a lot of these people. My first surgery was in March, and I had both my kidney removed and a complete hysterectomy the same day. My little sister and her husband came to be with me as I recuperated. She was in the next month to find out she had metastatic breast cancer. My ex-husband brought a hospital bed over, and he and our son set it up. I briefly went to the rehab center, but then home with physical therapy 3 days a week. I was really proud of myself. Boy, was I healing. You know the syndrome called being the fastest healer in the West? Well, that was me. I not only was going to, give myself 4 or 5 days, but that was too long. I was going to heal and be out running around. And I thought that was me. I knew that one more surgery and radiation, that's all I thought I had left. But kept feeling, though, as I had dodged that fast-moving bullet. No chemo was planned until the first visit after the surgery, when they said I would have to start chemo right after the lumpectomy. It was scheduled for May. I had not planned for that. I had not planned for that at all, and I was shaken. I tried to stay on counsel, but found that by 7:30 most nights I was sound asleep. I started chemo in July and resigned from borough council at the same time. It was a long, multi-month adventure. I was going to the 5 to 9 doctors a week still in Westchester, and that's a 45-minute drive. My internal work needed a deep, deep look. So I decided to live with high intention, sort of like what Karen was talking about this morning, just noticing the new flower that's coming up. So I decided I was going to live with high, high tension, watching the leaves on Route 926 going to Westchester turn yellow-green to the deep green we know that will protect us from the sun. I watched with fascination as the birds flew in and out of those trees, and I found characters in the clouds I saw. I revived an old practice that I have had throughout my adult life of wishing everyone I passed on the road a good and rewarding journey, and prayed that they would find the resources, if joy was in their life they needed, and the resources to deal with sorrow if that's where they were headed. Every person who helped me in any way became a person to cherish. Gratitude for their care and steadfastness became words of appreciation, and I would greet them all. Jerry, at the parking lot at Chester County Hospital, never parked my car very far away because he knew I wouldn't be terribly long, and that I couldn't walk very far. The red coats who greeted me in the lobby and gave me a mask if I'd forgotten mine, often with a hug, wished me well on my journey. Everyone who recognized me after losing my hair seemed glad to see me. Having a distinctive voice helped them place me as if they had not seen me in the interim. Still to this day, my hair, for those of you who knew me before, is not curly. It doesn't have a curl in it. This is not me. I got no idea where this came from, but it's been a fun adventure to look at it. And this is since August. This is how much hair I've grown back since August. I like myself bald. I found great joy in my baldness, but there it was. Those, everyone from Oxford recognized me, who recognized me, seemed glad to see me, have a distinctive voice, helped. Those who came for coffee with me and chatted about the events of the day, I just treasured them all. I got flowers and food and gift certificates and lots of love. Everywhere I turned, generous spirits rose up. People would most often say to me, though, I bet you're terrified. I wasn't terrified at all, but that was so strange for me. Mine has been a life of extraordinary gifts. I reflected on those gifts more than on anything else. The gift that I began to treasure the most was the gift of being present to the people, to the events, to the time, to the pain, to the next surgery, to the healing, to whatever. And so then I began to treasure most was that gift. Where am I? Where am I emotionally? Where am I spiritually? How does this all work? what am I feeling? I didn't know what I was feeling. I had never had all of these things before, because remember, I was the fastest healer in the West. I didn't ever know what it felt like to not be in charge. I thought I was so magnificent about that. But all of a sudden, and who do I need to reach out to? I began to think of old friends, treasured old friends that I hadn't seen in decades. They came to me, and I reached back out to them and say, you may not remember me, but I'm Mary. And they go, oh, Mary, how could we forget you? Well, that was good or bad, I'm not really sure. And what do I really need and want, and how can I express that without hurting people? One of my sisters wanted to come and just hang out with me. Oh, I thought I was going to kill myself. I love my sister. There is no doubt that I love this sister of mine. But to have her come out, the first thing she'd want to do is rearrange all my dressers and take everything to the Goodwill. And then she would start rearranging my closets, and I wouldn't be able to find anything. She liked throwing things out. If she had trouble with a can opener, she'd pitch it in the trash. It was the only can opener I had. It's like, it just goes on and on. She's a lovely human being. Lovely, lovely woman. But I did not want her around. So how do you tell somebody you love that they're welcome to sort of stand on the front porch, but you're not going to invite them in, basically. She lives in Florida. So they all thought everybody wanted to come and go to chemo with me. I mean, that seemed to be like the big thing. Everybody wanted to go to chemo. I was perfectly fine to drive home, but everybody wanted to. So my brother went to chemo with me. 2 of my sisters went to chemo with me. My friends went to chemo with me. It was actually a good time. It was a quiet 4 hours every couple weeks. So what do I need? How can I discourage what is not helpful and invite everything else? If you've been in this situation, it's easy to welcome what you want. It's really hard when people are coming toward you with all this love, and you don't know how to say that isn't helpful. It's not helpful for you to come and do that for me. I learned how to do it, and I learned how to live in gratitude. People would say, people wanted to use the language of the warrior and the fighter and the survivor to describe having cancer. And I began to rebel against that thought. That never felt right to me. I have never viewed this imperfect body as my enemy. I certainly did not want to go to war with it, for God's sakes. I was having enough trouble just, whoops. Okay, I know, my time's up. But having cancer, and so many cancers seemed to be beyond comprehension. But being that warrior fighter person was never me. So I was not there to conquer it. So I decided I was going to befriend it. And my friends go, oh God, here goes Mary again. Here goes Mary. And each evening as I went to sleep, and often at different times during the day, I would put my hands on my incisions, and I would talk to the cancer cells, for they were part of me. They weren't separate from me. They weren't living, out there, and then every once in a while decided to jump on in to see what havoc they could wreak. They were me too. And so I would put my hands on my incisions and talk to them. I felt it would be very disturbing and probably counterproductive to try to do any different. So I gave them friendly nicknames. And I told them it was time to go to sleep now, that we were all tired. My remaining kidney is named Herman. And he is a fine, fine chap. He is one of the best. You know, I like Herman. So I'm forever patting Herman and telling him to keep up the good work. You know, I had a friend who has a PKD, polycystic kidney disease, and I'd been telling her for 30 years I'd give her one of my kidneys if she ever needed it, and now she needs it, and I got nothing to share. You know, and so I told her that I'd try to find a substitute if I could. There are my friends. These are all my friends. They're not my enemies. They're a part of me. Sometimes I do wish they would go away, but that's also true with friends I have. I try to be lighthearted, but terribly sincere about the existence of these cells. I feel an immediate calm when I talk to them. As an outgrowth of this whole experience, I have committed to saying yes to any invitation that comes my way that is possible. 12 hours at the volleyball championship was a stretch. I won't probably say yes again, but I've done it. Basketball games, watching my children and grandchildren. Here it goes. Okay, I'm almost done. My presence is the only thing that I can give my children, my grandchildren, and my friends right now, except for my grandchildren, the occasional use of my car, because I don't use it much anymore, because I'm so tired of taking 5 to 9 trips a week to the doctors. This is the moment I have, and everything in it is a miracle. There's nothing trite about that. There is nothing trite. As you might remember, if you've been a UU a long time and have known me since I moved here, I'm definitely what we would call a process theologian. In the very short of it, that means I recognize the past, which I cannot change, and the future, which I cannot compel, and I am left with this very minute. That is the only time I can count on. Philosopher Alfred North Whitehead said the world is created every 1/8 of a second. I think it's probably more often than that. I think that's way too long for the future to be created. But I think what he was trying to say is that by the time you take the breath in, the world is created again and again. But any number is too much. When we say revelation is not sealed in any creed, minute, or experience, we are talking about this truth. Nothing is sealed. The minute we have is the only minute we can count on. And I have come to believe that, even riding over today, looking at the trees that haven't yet started to green up. What I saw were those lovely sticks with the sun pouring through them and the lines on the road, just coming in. And I thought, isn't that beautiful? Isn't it gorgeous? I don't have to know what it is. Revelation for me has only this minute to declare itself and can speak with a different voice next time we talk. We, you and I, and every single human being is always emerging. Cancer taught me to use language like we used with the kids this morning. It's all okay. I love you, and I will walk with you today. Amen.